Hello and welcome to 1000 PS TV. Today we've got a comparison for you that seems a little odd at first glance because we're talking about two Ducatis that could hardly be more different, but for some riders they might still be closer to each other than you'd first think. We're talking about the new Ducati Monster and the Diavel V4. But the real question behind this video is almost even more exciting than the comparison itself. Could the Diavel V4 perhaps be the hidden replacement for the former Monster 1200? That's exactly what we're looking at today, with data, impressions, and this very thought. A very warm welcome, my dear 1000 PS viewers, to a Ducati duel of a slightly different kind. Monster V2 against Diavel V4. Two bikes with a completely different appearance, a completely different attitude, and at first glance a completely different mission as well. The Monster is light, compact, direct, approachable and intuitive. The Diavel, wide, massive, yet surprisingly rideable, and with an imposing presence that even at a standstill has more presence than some motorcycles at full speed. So let's make one thing clear. From a visual and technical point of view, these two machines can't really be compared cleanly in any meaningful way. But for some naked bike fans, for whom the new Monster is too compact and the Street Fighter V4 would be too much escalation, the Diavel could very well be. Interesting, because the former Monster 1200 was dropped from the range a few years ago and now there is a gap in the Ducati portfolio. But before we really get started, just a quick note from us. In our part of the world, there is still a lively used market for the former Monster, but everyone else who is considering buying new instead and has their eye on the Monster V2 or the Diavel V4, stay right here. Now this is where it gets interesting. We're deliberately starting with the Monster because in this comparison it is the clear point of reference. It's the bike that best shows today where this model line has developed. And at the same time, why some riders say, yes, fair enough, brilliant, but somehow something of the old Monster myth has been lost along the way. Because the Monster, now in its 5th generation, follows a very clear concept. It doesn't want to intimidate, it no longer wants to act like the big tough guy, and it no longer wants to impress with displacement and maximum torque. The new Monster wants to be one thing above all: a light, modern, extremely accessible naked bike that still delivers on country roads despite strict emissions regulations and offers clean performance in town. And you notice exactly that just standing next to it. But at the very latest, you notice it the moment you get on and ride off. The bike feels narrow, compact, tidy. Not built for show, not built to overwhelm you, but as if everything has been designed to make riding as easy as possible for you. You sit on it and pretty quickly get that pleasant feeling of, yes, this fits, this feels good, and that is exactly its great strength. Less statement, more riding machine. And that is exactly where the Diavel starts to become exciting, because at first glance, it is practically the complete opposite. It is not reduced, but omnipresent, not light-footed in the way it comes across, but heavyweight in its effect, not understated, but completely deliberately staged. And yet it suddenly appears in the same context, not because it technically has the same job, not because it rides in a very similar way, but because for some riders it becomes interesting precisely where the new Monster can no longer quite play the role of a big, confident Ducati naked. And that brings us right into the central question of this video. Let's stay with the Monster. because visually you can already see very clearly what Ducati has tried to do here. The new Monster does not want to be retro, it does not want to look back into the past at all costs. Even so, the Italians wanted the design to move closer again to the idea that once made the Monster big. The lines are compact, the tank sits nicely in the center, the tail stays short, the whole silhouette once again feels as though it has been cast from one piece. Let's maybe start with a quick walk around of the Monster. What defines the Monster? First and foremost, the round headlight. Although it is not completely round anymore, it has become slightly oval. It reminds me a bit of an MV Agusta, but I do not care. Better well copied than badly invented. It looks very smart. The tank has also become nicer than on the predecessor. In terms of its shape, it once again recalls an earlier muscle bike, even though, of course, everything has become a little narrower. Mainly because of the engine, because of the new 890 unit, an engine that works really well. By now it is fitted in 6 bikes. And in my opinion, it reaches its best form in the Monster. Because here we only have 111 horsepower, compared with the Street Fighter or Hyper, where we have 120. In return, the engine is optimized for drive, smooth running and low revs as well. It already gets going from 2000 revolutions per minute. From 3000 you really start having fun. And from 4000 it leaves no one cold. The chassis is good as well. We have suspension from Showa, fork at the front, shock from Showa, not adjustable. Apart from the spring preload on the shock, it suits me very well. So at 75 kilos with gear on, it is set up very sportily and still comfortable. And when you have more luggage or you take a passenger, you can still turn the spring preload at the rear. Tires are Pirelli Rosso 4, excellent choice, a very sporty touring tire. Although calling it a touring tire, well, it is already a very sporty tire. It is genuinely good fun. And the exhaust system is also very nicely done. It is certainly very light. In any case, it is well tuned. It sounds quite good too, although it is drowned out by the aggressive intake roar, which sounds very much like racing. The length is fine in my opinion, and I would not change anything on the system. I would not buy anything else for it. It will not get better. Right, perhaps one final look, and then we move on with the Diavel. If, on the other hand, we look at the Diavel, then we are talking about something completely different. This is not about essence, this is about presence. The front looks wide, the flanks feel like trained shoulders, the 240 rear tire is not a footnote but a statement, and the 4-exit silencer makes absolutely no secret of the fact that there is a V4 here providing brutal drive. The Monster feels coherent, the Diavel feels spectacular, and for many that is already a first good reason when it comes to the buying decision. Maybe we should still do a quick walk around of the Diavel V4. What defines the Diavel V4? Well, first and foremost, this martial look, that angry stare from the daytime running light, those huge air intakes that remind you a bit of a VMAX from the 80s and 90s. Yes, and definitely the engine, the V4 Gran Turismo, a genuinely brilliant unit, already familiar from the Multistrada V4, really good. Yes, the look is also continued with the exhaust, with the 4 pipes, 1 pipe per cylinder. Yes, fair enough, the wheels are amazing too, 240 rear wheel, a proper statement. And the cool thing is that everything here is really perfectly matched. So the geometry, the wheels, the chassis, for example, when you get to the edge of the tire or ride right to the edge, you are also nicely at the limit with the footrests. Yes, you can really make use of everything this bike offers. And I honestly do not know of any cruiser that goes round corners as well as the Diavel V4. Really brilliant. In engine terms, Things initially seem fairly clear on paper. The Monster runs the new 890 V2, compared with the Street Fighter or the new Hyper, only with 111 horsepower and 91 Newton meters. But you should not let that fool you, because this motorcycle does not live from breathtaking peak power, but from how early and how cleanly it delivers that power. The Monster does not only work when you rev it brutally high or ring it right out, but much earlier than that. At 2,000 revolutions per minute, something is already happening. At 3,000 revolutions per minute, there is proper torque, and at 4,000 revolutions per minute, it really comes alive. And on a country road, that means exactly what you hope for from a bike like this. Strong drive out of corners, riding with plenty of shifting, little thinking, lots of thrust. You do not have to keep the Monster constantly entertained. You do not have to push it for something to happen. It does not work against you, it works with you. 111 horsepower feels like considerably more on the road than it sounds on the spec sheet. Then you get on the Diavel, and of course it is immediately clear, here we are talking about a different weight class. 1,158 cubic centimeters, 168 horsepower, 126 Newton meters. That is not just a little bit more, that is significantly more. But even more interesting than the raw performance figures is the way it delivers that pressure. The V4 Gran Turismo feels composed, very even, very assured. It has no hole, no hysterical top-end spike, no rough escalation, just continuous shove. And that is exactly what makes it so impressive. The Monster feels lively and direct when you open the throttle. The Diavel feels superior. The Monster runs off with you like a marathon runner. The Diavel, on the other hand, marches like a professional boxer, and now the Monster 1200 question comes back into play. Because the earlier 1200 was, in terms of performance and its whole self-image, naturally closer to the Diavel world. More displacement, more pressure from low down, more power in the mid-range. And that is precisely why, for some riders, the Diavel feels emotionally closer to the former Monster 1200 than the new Monster itself. Not because it is technically the same kind of motorcycle, but because today it is more likely to deliver that feeling of total control and pure dominance. With the Monster, Ducati builds confidence through accessibility. An 815mm seat height does not sound ultra low on paper, but the decisive thing here is not the number alone, but how narrow the bike is in terms of the step-over arc. That means you can get your feet down more easily than you might first expect. Added to that is this relaxed, natural riding position, not too aggressive, not too touring-focused. You sit on it and do not have to sort yourself out. You do not have to search for the right position. Everything simply fits. The posture is upright but not passive, with enough pressure on the front wheel. You have control straight away, and the whole bike gives you this feeling of flow and lightness. Ergonomically, the Diavel does something completely different. At 790mm, the seat height is actually lower, but the feeling is still more elevated. You sit deeper in the bike, more integrated, more wrapped in by the tank and seat, but with the wide handlebar, you have plenty of leverage and also more room to brace and hold yourself properly under hard acceleration. That suits its character extremely well. As a result, the Diavel does not feel like a cozy sofa, more like a very wide, very high-quality leather chair that is ready at any moment to push you brutally backwards. Comfortable, yes, but not softened up. Instead, sporty and taut. And now we come to the point where, from a technical perspective, you basically have to take apart the idea of it being the Monster 1200 successor. Because if you simply look at the geometry, it immediately becomes clear that dynamically the two bikes follow two completely different philosophies. The Monster sits on a 1,492mm wheelbase, a 23.3-degree head angle, 92mm of trail, and a 180 rear tire. Added to that are the low weight, the narrow middle section, and the compact build. This is the language of a motorcycle that wants to tip into corners. You give it an input and it follows. That is exactly what you feel in the riding impressions too. On country roads, the Monster feels extremely immediate, not nervous, but very direct. And that is exactly why it makes so much sense on tight country roads. With the Diavel, on the other hand, you have a 1,593mm wheelbase, a very relaxed 26-degree head angle, 112mm of trail, so 2 centimeters more than the Monster, and a 240 rear tire, 50 kilos more weight. So no, dynamically this is not simply a Monster in large, not at all. The Diavel brings more calm, more straight line stability, more force. But here comes the surprise. Despite these dimensions, the Diavel is not a corner refuser. The Diavel is surprisingly manageable, at least compared with what you would expect from the way it looks. Direction changes also work better than you would give this motorcycle credit for at first glance. The 240 rear tire is not just some flat cruiser boot that is only there for show, but is actually designed with handling in mind. That is impressive. But just as important is the fact that it will never feel as playful, as light-footed, or as effortless as the Monster. The Diavel can go round corners, the Monster wants to go round corners. That is the main difference in the whole comparison. In everyday life, the Monster is the more logical choice, but not in the boringly sensible sense, rather in the best sense. It is light, easy to read. It needs little getting used to, little strength, little effort. You can take it every day without the ride immediately having to become a small event. It does not feel like, today I am treating myself to something wild, but simply like a motorcycle you enjoy riding often. Added to that are the practical key figures. 14-liter tank, consumption around 5.2 liters, 170 kilometers. It all makes sense. Not spectacular, but exactly right for a modern naked bike. Unfortunately, on the Monster, Ducati only lists several comfort features as pre-installed preparation. Cruise control is one of them. The Diavel is surprising precisely in this area. On the one hand, because at first glance, you would not really expect this level of everyday usability and intuitive handling from it, and on the other, because an extensive comfort package is already part of its character as standard. 20-liter tank, greater range, cruise control as standard, multimedia, more space, and an engine that is not nervous but works with real composure. You ride the Monster to work, on the after-work loop, to the lake and back, and you do not think too much about it. You can do all of that on the Diavel as well, but with it, every little outing becomes an event, and every stop becomes your grand entrance. The Monster is quietly good, the Diavel is noticeably good, and now comes the part where all the emotions and dreams briefly collide with reality. The Monster starts in Germany at 12,890 euros and in Austria at 15,595 euros. The Diavel, on the other hand, starts in Germany at 27,890 euros and in Austria at 35,995 euros. That is a difference of 15,000 euros in Germany and even 20,400 euros in Austria. So not exactly an amount you just shrug off with a smile, but two very opposite financial worlds. Here too, the Monster is clearly the more sensible Ducati, but not only in terms of purchase price, also in terms of running costs. It is cheaper to get into, it uses less fuel, it is the motorcycle you buy when you want a properly good naked bike without completely bleeding yourself dry in the process. The Diavel is something else. More power, more presence, more comfort features, more exclusivity, more prestige, and of course a significantly higher price. Of course, with its long valve clearance interval and its equipment, it also has strong arguments, but at the end of the day, it remains the much more decadent motorcycle. And that is exactly why at this point we have to say honestly once again, if someone is actually looking for that old big Monster 1200 feeling, then the Diavel is one alternative. But it is certainly not the only one. The second honest answer is the used market. Because if you are really looking for that classic big Monster with more tradition, more Ducati feeling, and exactly that blend of shove, trellis frame and single-sided swing arm, then the earlier Monster 1200 is a very hot tip. The Diavel may possibly take over part of that role, but even for a lot of money, it cannot replace the whole character of the big Monster. Right? And now it is your turn. Would you go for the light, direct, accessible Monster or the brutal, composed, extroverted Diavel? Let us go straight to my personal conclusion and to the answer to the original question, is the Diavel V4 the hidden replacement for the Monster 1200? Technically, very clearly no. These two motorcycles are far too different in terms of geometry, weight, ergonomics, riding feel and basic character. The Diavel is not a monster in large, not a monster with a V4, and not a true successor in the classic sense either. But if we look at this question not only technically, but also from an emotional and human perspective, then for some riders, the Diavel can very much be a good alternative to the Monster 1200. Not as a true successor, but as the Ducati that today takes over more of that big, dominant, charismatic motorcycle feeling within the range. Are you one of those people who say, the new Monster is surely good, but it is too compact for me, too sensible, not enough big Ducati? Then definitely have a look at the Diavel V4. It is the stronger statement, and it will impress you and everyone around you every single day. Right? And that is it once again. Thanks for watching. If you think I still managed to save this difficult comparison through the final corner, then please give me a thumbs up and a comment for the algorithm and leave a subscription as well. Questions, suggestions or complaints, hammer them down in the comments too. Stay healthy, look after yourselves, cheers, and see you next time on 1000 PS.